Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this international conference on banking, insurance, and business management during December of 2020. What a terrible year we've been having with regards to this COVID-19 pandemic. I hope all of you are safe and healthy along with your family members. With the permission of the conference chairs, academic leaders here present, and all of the honorable guests, let me start by saying that this is very important to see that you all have a session or many sessions perhaps regarding management policies and practices related to ethics, morality, and sustainability, which is obviously even more important in the banking, insurance, and business management arena, perhaps compared to many other professions. So you and I are role models of high moral and ethical standards in any community, any society, and I'm glad to see all of you present here. I wish you a great conference during the next 2 days, and I hope to hear many critical debates regarding all of these topics during this tough year that we've been having. So I plan to basically give you some critical points to think about, reflect upon as you make decisions in every single operation on the day-to-day basis. We're going to talk a little bit about sustainability as well as leadership and what it basically means for you and I to take a leadership role in our daily lives. Today's session is entitled Aligning Management Policies and Practices to Enhance Global Ethical Maturity Perceptions in Our Local Communities, more importantly here in South Asia. We often hear that life happens when you're busy making other plans. We need to plan and live according to the highest ideals of humanity in order to leave the best legacy possible for ourselves, for our local communities, and obviously for society at large. So remember that we only live once, and we need to live it well, because if we live it well, perhaps once is enough. Let us start by saying that the population is growing in many developing nations around the globe, including Afghanistan and Pakistan and many other nations. Yet, unfortunately, we notice that certain practices and certain mindsets seem to be very primitive regarding the hoarding of power, survival of the fittest, and win-lose mindset or thinking that we see among many very powerful nations and powerful individuals. So many individuals and nations are becoming somewhat divided in terms of their ideologies, while unfortunately the limited resources are running out. For example, we're seeing shortage of food, warming of the climate, and climate disasters, deforestation that is being experienced all over the globe. So we know we live in an interdependent world. COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated that to all of us. So when you think of the globe as one world without man-made borders being relevant for the well-being of you and I as human beings or as humanity in general. So we need ethics, we need sustainable development goals or global goals, and leaders who can actually effectively govern with equity and fairness for every person on earth. Ethics, sustainability, and leadership must become the foundational imperatives of how we operate in every single business, whether it's in the banking industry, insurance industry, or just managing in any industry. So let us talk about ethics as being about sustainable governance in terms of our own individual behaviors as well as group behaviors within the organizations. So ethics are principles of conduct which govern our individual and group behaviors. These are standards that we use to decide what our conduct should be. It involves morality, society's accepted standards of behavior. And morality involves basic questions of right and wrong and how to treat other people in our departments, in our communities, in our society in general. If you look at society in general and how it perceives many South Asian countries like Pakistan or Afghanistan, unfortunately, with regards to the ethical maturity in terms of business, we're not being seen as being highly mature countries when it comes to ethical maturity. You can see that these scores that we see in terms of India, Pakistan, or Afghanistan, they seem to be at the very lower end of the corruption perception index year after year. So if you're looking at the 2010 data, you notice that Afghanistan ranks at the very, very bottom, and Pakistan is a much higher, but still in the lower end compared to the other 180 countries. And if we're looking at the 2011 data of the CPI scores, again, Pakistan, India, Afghanistan seem to be on the lower end. So what is it that we can do locally in terms of our own individual behaviors in business, as well as in terms of the banking industry, in other areas of business at the local business environment to change society's perception of how we actually behave ethically? Oftentimes we say at a local level that we're Muslims, we always do things ethically. However, some of our behaviors obviously does not seem to be aligned with high ethical maturity levels when it comes to dealing with other people. In other words, sometimes we mistreat other individuals in business, and that gives us a lower score when it comes to CPI scores as judged by the international community. So those are 2010 and 2011 scores. But let's see what has happened over the last 9 years since then. Well, unfortunately, if you look at the 2019 data, South Asian countries like Afghanistan, India, and Pakistan seems to be still on the highly corrupt scores of CPI index. So if you look at, for example, a country like Afghanistan, it hasn't really changed much since 2010 and 2011. And this is the data all the way till 2019. And if we're looking at Pakistan, it was fairly high compared to Afghanistan score, but nonetheless, it has stayed flat over the last decade. So that means we're not going in the right direction when it comes to our level of ethical maturity. So in the banking industry and the insurance industry, obviously, we need to do a lot more to be role models for all the other industries. Before we can move on, we need to know what is the real problem. Albert Einstein mentioned that the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So in order to get out of this rut, or the basically stable perception of our ethical environment being at the lower level or the highly unethical environment, we need to do some things differently, and that has to start with our own behaviors in order for it to be modeled by others in our vicinity, in our departments, and in our communities. And one of the things we need to look at, what is it that creates this corruption? Well, money inequity and corruption are related to some extent. So how we incentivize people might have a lot to do with their behavior in our local communities. If we ask the question, does money motivate and corrupt people? Obviously, yes. Money by itself is not bad. The more of it you have, the more good things you can do. In the banking industry, obviously, you all have a lot of money and you want more of it so you can help more people, more businesses. And that's a good thing. But it's when we misuse that power that creates a corrupt environment. So in reality, no amount of money is likely to make a person happy, right, in a sustainable way. So happiness lies in doing good things for ourselves, for our family members, and for society at large. And that's what we need to focus on to make sure we have high standards that are perceived to be ethical, not only at the local level, but also at the international level. We need to have sound regulations in continuous education, which can help in driving our individual and collective behaviors in the right direction in everything we do as part of our operation. How do we do this? In organizational behavior courses and workshops, we often talk about this. I like how the U.S. Embassy in Thailand has certain values that they inculcate all employees when they are basically brought on board. And they focus on these 4 values: integrity, unity, creativity, responsibility. In other words, do the right thing. Do it together with respect. Do it a new way, better, faster, and smarter. And then finally, responsibility, which says do your best for yourself, for your team, and for your community overall. We need to be focused on governance and sustainability. Local, national, and international forms of corruption must be and should be eliminated. because they're not contributing to the well-being of the local people, local society. So collectively, we must say no to any form of corruption, which includes the day-to-day bribery sometimes when we're dealing with local officials. The best weapon to fight corruption is a pen or a pencil, and obviously some notebook and some textbooks or books through continuous education and training of everybody over and over again until a high level of standards are set in place as a model for everybody else. A proactive ethics training program is much more effective in communicating the values and standards of our local culture, in explaining the expectations of the company to all employees, and in preventing wrongdoings and in reducing court-imposed penalties compared to an ethics program that is forced upon you by the judges in a court system. So we need to take a proactive approach that is much better than being reactive to, obviously, court-imposed penalties. We should remember that prevention is always better than asking for forgiveness. When it comes to personal universal values, I like to emphasize that we need to, first of all, respect ourselves. We need to respect the community. We need to respect life in itself for all individuals. This is where we need to be equitable in every decision we make. We need to respect the environment, the plants, the animals around us. Without them, we cannot have a healthy environment. And finally, we need to have a healthy respect for the future and what is about to come. If we leave this planet worse than we found it, that means our children, grandchildren will not appreciate it, and their lives obviously will suffer in the future. So again, let us focus on sustainability in what it means. Sustainability in its simplest format is the ability of a company or a firm or an organization to effectively as well as efficiently manage their core economic responsibilities, while at the same time they are being proactive in respecting the environment and being accountable to their stakeholders in a transparent manner. So a stakeholder could be obviously not just the people who are buying your products or services, but also those who are indirectly affected by your products and services. So all of us are going to be stakeholders in some capacity for all organizations, whether we use their products directly or indirectly. The United Nations mentions that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So that's a good definition to keep in mind with regards to sustainable development. Every year, between 30 to 40% of the food produced worldwide is wasted. What a waste that is. 1.2 to 2 billion metric tons of food is wasted every single year. Waste is entering our rivers, our groundwater, and oceans, thereby it's poisoning our available resources in every possible form. Stormwater drains capture rainwater on roads and move it into canals and eventually bigger rivers and or the ocean around us. This means antifreeze, gasoline, and any other toxin from cars go into our neighborhoods and our oceans, and obviously we consume it over and over again, thereby poisoning ourselves and our relatives. Water scarcity affects 40% of the people around the world and is projected to increase in the years to come. We see that unfortunately happening in Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and other neighboring countries are suffering from this water scarcity as well. Global emissions in carbon dioxide have increased over 50% over the past 2 decades. Again, that is a United Nations statistic. We see that unfortunately businesses are trying to get away with the pollution of the environment. In the United States, during September 2015, Volkswagen was found guilty of manipulating emission controls in some of their cars through their installed software in willfully falsifying data to make it look like they were actually in compliance with the expected standards. Obviously, that is unethical for a company to be basically falsifying data to say that they are within the standards that the government expects. What if the government doesn't have high standards for all the businesses? Will all these businesses take advantage of the lack or the absence of these laws? So we need to have sound regulations and good governance to enforce those laws onto local companies as well as international companies equally. We can prevent the worsening impact of climate change by reducing it, by combating it, by stopping it, and by adapting to it as necessary. We can start by focusing on sustainability in everything we do. As a matter of fact, research shows that businesses which actively take into account the issue of climate or sustainability tend to enjoy about 18% higher return on their investment than those that do not. And obviously, we need to follow this lead because you can actually be more profitable by being sustainable and having high ethical standards in terms of making the future a little bit better for you and the future generations. And also, authors have written that it is critical for modern firms and leaders to grow profits in a responsible, ethical, and sustainable manner. The way forward is that we need to educate students, consumers, and the workforce on the necessity and benefits of sustainability. And in this case, we need to know the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The Sustainable Development Goals agenda for 2030 includes 3 interdependent dimensions of sustainable social, economic, and environmental development. And in this case, obviously, the economic and the environment tend to get a lot more attention compared to the social. So that is why I'm so happy that at this conference, you all have given this topic an opportunity to talk a lot more about the social development goals of sustainability as well. These SDGs are also known as global goals. They were adopted by the United Nations in 2015, and they are a universal call to action to end poverty, to protect the planet, and to ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. So there are 17 integrated sustainable development goals. Number 1 starts with no poverty. Wouldn't that be a good thing to have? Obviously, all of us can take certain steps to make sure we help those around us. Through the pledge to leave no one behind, all countries should commit to fast-track progress for the poorest or most disadvantaged. In other words, those who are furthest behind the first. SDGs are designed to bring the world to several life-changing zeros, which include zero poverty, zero hunger, as well as AIDS and discrimination against women and girls in all nations. So everyone is needed to reach these ambitious targets by the year 2030. We only have 10 more years left. The creativity, the know-how, the technology, and the financial resources from all of the society is necessary to achieve the goals in every context. The goal of SDGs is to enable people's understanding of the world in fundamentally new ways and to behave for the long-term interest of everybody in the community, locally, nationally, as well as internationally. SDGs call for members of each community to work together to bridge the multifaceted differences and conflicts that exist in their day-to-day lives. Societal problems tend to arise and cause sustained conflicts when too many individuals choose to follow their own individual profit maximization goals for their immediate satisfaction rather than working for the community's long-term interest and goals. This is where sometimes we get into the collective action trap. In parts of South Asia, we know that no single person or group can solve the prolonged and widespread foreign intervention, civil unrest, and even corruption problems that every one of us seem to experience at least once a month, if not more often. So we need collective action as united Asians in close cooperation with the international community to get out of this trap that we all seem to be living in. domestic, national, and international partnerships for collective action can and do result in specific agreed upon institutional arrangements which mandate that there be regular and continuous oversight of the public sector to monitor and encourage good governance for the long-term interest of everybody in our local communities. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development mentions that good governance is characterized by participation, transparency, accountability, rule of law, effectiveness, and equity, among others. Also, the IMF states that good governance refers to the management of government in a manner that is essentially free of abuse and corruption, and with due regard for the rule of law. So we can summarize that good governance must consist of transparency, accountability, inclusion, equity, responsiveness, good management and leadership, which includes efficiency as well as effectiveness in stakeholder engagement. If we're ignoring those in our communities, we're not obviously serving them well. We need to integrate their voice into all of our decisions in an ethical and sustainable manner. Well, the future looks brighter, actually. So there's good news, despite the fact that we're going through COVID-19 pandemic this year. We see that the younger generation, or Generation Z, is adapting to and demanding more sustainability-oriented lifestyles and behaviors. So that is good for all of us, especially if you're managers and human resource professionals recruiting more people. You need to obviously tap into this young mindset for the short term, which will yield positive long-term sustainability benefits, both for humanity as well as for planet Earth. So we need to take advantage of the younger generation that is growing up with obviously higher standards when it comes to sustainability, morality, and fairness and equity for all. After all, it is the moral obligation of all of us to protect the future of our children. As the ambassador of Italy, again, at the ICMR conference during 2015 in Lahore said, we need to think creatively to develop green standards in every element of our operation. So by acting locally or even egoistically in our own best interest, each nation can actually contribute significantly to the solution of a global challenge. We need to act locally in order to solve global challenges. In other words, you and I need to be a role model of it in our departments and hopefully our organizations, our communities, thereby influencing many, many more. That is obviously the essence of good leadership. Today's citizens expect all leaders from around the world to find and to implement solutions or to mitigate or even adapt to climate change through sustainable solutions and equitable procedures. So what is equity and how does it differ from equality? We need to go beyond equality to equity, which can be more sustainable for society, for everybody. In other words, we need to be fair to everyone. So think about these two pictures that you see on the left and in the right. Which seems to be fairer? Equally distributing, obviously, the resources that you have so all these three people can see the game, or equitably. That's the goal here. The goal here is obviously for everybody to enjoy the game and see this cricket game. But if we go with equality, that means one person will suffer. If we go with equity, that means everybody can enjoy the game in a fair way. So we need to implement equitable goals and policies in an inclusive manner for all diverse people groups in our communities. Equity needs to be exercised, especially when it comes to the insurance industry, the banking industry, and by all managers and leaders. Inequity can lead to the poor getting poorer and the rich getting richer, along with disappointments, hatred, prolonged conflict, as well as violence, which are not necessarily sustainable, nor is it something that we want. Of course, equality has to do with giving everyone the exact same resources, whereas equity involves distributing resources based on the needs of the recipients. Both concepts encourage fairness. Equality tends to achieve fairness through treating everyone the same regardless of their need. However, equity, on the other hand, achieves fairness by treating everyone differently depending on their specific needs. Equity reduces the need for corruption and it empowers everyone to hold each other responsible. Sustainable and equitable decision-making requires that all professionals focus on having an efficient process which eliminates any waste in the production process. We need to practice sustainable leadership, which basically means you need to start with having a business based on economic value creation. We need to do that in a legal and ethical manner in every local community. We need to practice high ethical standards. In other words, we need to go beyond the law. And then we need to take social responsibility for everything we do, as well as environmental responsibility in everything we do in order to achieve sustainable leadership. Let us focus on leadership a little bit more. Effective leaders tend to provide direction in meaning to followers toward ethics, equity, sustainability, good governance, and hope. They provide, transmit, and whisper hope toward a brighter and more sustainable future. Leadership is the process of influencing others to facilitate the attainment of achievable objectives and goals using equitable and sustainable processes. All of you, regardless of your position or rank, are and can be leaders for all others that you will influence in the days, weeks, and years to come. The goal is to be the role model as opposed to telling other people what to do. In other words, do what you expect of others to be doing. So if you're a manager in an organization, you certainly need to be a role model of what you do and what you expect so others can follow it more easily and more quickly. Leadership, according to Dr. Paul Hersey, is adapting our behavior to the performance needs of the person being influenced. So this person can be your employee, a boss, a child, a parent, or a community member in general. So leadership does not have to be influenced over those you have rank. In other words, it does not have to be about influencing your employees. Leadership is about influencing your bosses, influencing your colleagues, influencing others in the community, the politicians, to go in the right direction. But the best way to do this is obviously by ourselves, to make sure we're leading ourselves in the right direction by modeling good behavior, and then hopefully others will follow as well. Leadership is about knowing the way, showing the way, and going the way. So those are the three elements I think all of us can practice. Know the way, show the way, and go the way in order for you to be consistently a good, ethical, and sustainable leader. In other words, you are practicing what you preach on a day-to-day basis. It's been said that if you understand everything, you must be misinformed. This is an old Japanese proverb. Obviously, the world is much more complex than any of us can imagine at any given time. So we need to be good situational leaders and do what is right with high ethical standards in every aspect of our decision making. So let me ask you this question. What is the best vitamin for an ethical and sustainable person? Obviously, there are a lot of solutions because we have too many complex problems. But if we want to be ethical and sustainable, what is the best vitamin for it? Well, one solution, one vitamin is B1. Now, what does this mean? Those of you who are the younger generation, Z in the audience, you probably figured it out already, right? Vitamin B1 is the best one. Why? Because you will be the role model of it. You need to be an ethical and sustainable person. So B1, be an individual who is ethical and sustainable, and others will follow you. Do what you expect of others, because people are likely to follow the actions that they observe of respected leaders. Be an ethical role model. If we tell other people to wear your mask in order to stop the spread of COVID-19, but we don't wear it ourselves, that is obviously duplicity. That is saying one thing and doing another. So we need to be role models of what we expect of everybody else, because it is good for the collective benefit of all in our local, national, and international communities. Overall, as ethical and sustainable leaders, collectively we can operationalize the 5 R's in every part of our work in consumption. You can reduce, you can reuse, you can recycle, you can renew, and you can respect the environment in the law in every community you live in. Become aware of ethical concerns. Be ethical, and if you cannot, then be careful. Let me end by saying that all of the work and effort that you and I do does not necessarily translate into great results immediately. When it comes to education, training, and socialization of everybody with regards to high standards and ethical decision-making and sustainability to make a positive change on the world, if not in our communities alone, it's going to take a little bit of time, and it's going to take reinforcement and repetition. It's sort of like the Chinese bamboo tree. When a Chinese bamboo tree is planted, it really doesn't grow much during the first 3 to 4 years. As a matter of fact, it only grows just about a few inches during the first 4 to 5 years. However, in its 5th and 6th year, it grows up to 90 feet within a year time period. So all of the growth during the first 4 years is all underground. But the result obviously shows above the ground by the Chinese bamboo tree growing up to 90 feet during its 5th and 6th year. So continue doing the good work and know that the results will follow. Good luck to all of you. I wish you a great conference. Good luck to all of you as you end this year of the pandemic COVID-19 and start the new year 2020. I wish you good health and a great conference. Good luck.